You're listening to another great podcast in the MyMac Podcasting Network.
News, views, security stories, technology, and all sorts of other related chit-chat that catches our attention. Welcome to the Essential Apple Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition. Obviously, we had the Apple event. We might or might not have time to talk about that because today we have with us Ashley Hewson from Serif, and we're going to talk to him first. And Donny's on a bit of a timeline, so if we run out of time, bad luck. I thought talking to Ashley is more interesting than talking about the Apple event that the world and his brother have chewed over already. So there you go. We have Donny, of course, as I just mentioned. Hello, Donny.
Hello, it's been a while.
Yep, it has, but there we go. And, of course, as mentioned, we have Ashley Hewson. Hello, Ash.
How you doing, all right?
Yeah, not too bad. Still suffering with my bunged up nose, but there we go. Soldier on regardless. Soldier on regardless. Well, it's been a while since we had you on, Ash, and quite a lot has happened since then, I guess. Obviously, you launched Publisher, which when you came on last time was in beta, or is just going into beta as it happened. Which I was on the beta. I did the beta, and then, of course, when it was launched, you had an event and blew everybody away with the secret sauce that wasn't in the beta, which was, of course, the studio mode.
That's right.
How's that gone? I mean, I'm assuming that's been a big hit because everybody I talk to seems to think it's a big hit.
Oh yeah, it's gone in incredibly well. I mean, it was a bit of a funny situation with us when we had the app in beta because obviously this big feature that we had, Studio Link, was something that we were kind of keeping under wraps, really. So we're having everything, all the other features and everything else of the app being sort of tested out fully, but by quite a long beta period we're in. I think it's nearly 9 months in total in the end before we launched it. And yeah, it was obviously quite hard to kind of restrain ourselves in terms of being able to, talk about this this great new functionality that we wanted to wait to reveal until launch day. I mean, it was actually one of those things that, for those people who don't know, the whole idea of Studio Link is that when you're using Affinity Publisher, you can then instantly switch, effectively, you instantly switch the app into Affinity Designer or into Affinity Photo. You're not leaving the app, it's all within Affinity Publisher, but it opens up all of the functionality of, full-blown photo editing and full-blown vector design. But the way you access that is with three little buttons in the top left-hand side of the app. We call them personas because effectively you're changing the persona of the app into something else. And in fact, during the beta period, those buttons were visible. They just weren't enabled. So we had a lot of people speculating over what they might do. There were a few people who guessed it right. There were a lot of people who guessed it totally wrong. But yeah, it was good that in the main it was actually quite a big surprise when we announced that big feature.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that keynote and it was one of those. I did wonder what those buttons might do, and I thought they might do something a bit like that, but not exactly like that. And yeah, I was like, oh my God, they've blown their doors off.
Well, I mean, it's good to hear you had that reaction. I mean, I think that a lot of people had that reaction. It's kind of one of those things, I guess, that, and I think I said it on the keynote, is that a lot of people have kind of got used to a way of working, right? That you have these separate, totally independent apps for photo editing, graphic design or desktop publishing. And it is a painful process in terms of the workflow that you have to go through and the round trip you have to make between all these different apps. But it's just something that I think everyone's just come to expect and just assumes that that's just like the way it is.
I think we've very much, it's like I won't quite say it's Stockholm syndrome, but we've become used to it because that's just the way it is. And traditionally at best you might be able to right click or double click on a graphic or something and have it, launch the original editor so that you can edit it and then come back. But it was that really was. It was like, oh my God, that is fantastic. Why has nobody thought of this before?
I mean, I think one of the things probably is that actually maybe no one's had the ability to do it before, in the sense that really, I can't remember. We might have spoken a bit about this last time, but fundamentally, the core technology that all of the apps are based on is actually identical across all three apps, and that's also why, of course, we share the same file format between all the three apps. That's the only way that we can do that too. So because we kind of built the foundations of the apps, and they all share that same foundation, that's kind of the reason why we can do Studio Link. And it was actually something that we had in our mind right from the very, very beginning of developing the apps. And this, I'm talking 10 years ago. In fact, the very first presentation that Tony Brightman, he's a lead developer who pretty much come up with the concept of Affinity. That very, very first presentation was actually all about how we could have a single app that then, with an instant click, could change its persona into whether photo editing or graphic design or desktop publishing, and that was the core principle of what his vision for it all was, and so it seems a long time since then. That was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And obviously since that, and it was 5 years ago we launched Affinity Designer, and then 3.5 years ago we launched Photo. Then of course we come out of Windows and we launched iPad version. So we've done all of these things before actually getting to the point where we could finally reveal and talk about actually what Affinity is actually all about.
And that's
I have to say it not only does it work, it's amazing. I mean, it's just instant. There's no lag when you switch between apps, and I used it 5 minutes ago. It's just so smooth. It's like you've never left any app. You're just using another set of tools. You guys did an amazing job.
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, obviously it's been our labor of love. It's been this vision that we've had for sort of 10 years. But I think that, also, obviously, of course, it's a really cool thing to be able to do, but actually it is genuinely something that really does, change, really sort of changes up the sort of the speed of the workflow that you can have with working on things. I mean, there's even simple stuff that you wouldn't even necessarily immediately think of. For example, that you've got like a shared undo history, or a consistent undo history while you go doing things. So, Simon, I think you mentioned about the ability in some apps you can right click and then go off to the source app and then maybe edit it and then come back to your desktop publishing app where that change that you've just done might be reflected. But all of the steps that you might have taken in the photo editing app, you might have added a couple of adjustment layers, added a mask or whatever it might be. Once you come back into your desktop publishing app with those changes, that only counts as one undo step. So if you hit undo, all of those things that you've just done in your photo editing app has just been undone, if that makes sense. Whereas with us, obviously if you go into the photo persona, you add 5 adjustment layers, a mask, whatever, and then you go back into the publisher persona. If you undo once, that's just going to remove the mask. If you undo again, it just removes the last adjustment layer, etc., etc. So it's kind of little things like that I think, when you first learn about it, you don't necessarily think.
You don't always grasp just how big a change it actually is. And as you say, the fact that underneath it all, they're all one file format, as you said in your keynote. We've tagged them; they show up as AF Photo or AF Designer or AF Pub, but actually that's just so that the Finder or the File Explorer knows which app it technically, quote unquote, belongs to, and that is something that it does make a big difference once you get used to it. I mean, the first thing I found, using Affinity was I'm so used to just saving my documents and working the way that we've talked about. So the fact that to get to take something from Affinity Photo and take it out, you've got to do export. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but it just at first felt a bit odd. But of course, once you start putting the blocks together, then it makes perfect sense, because there's no need to say, I want to export this to a JPEG. Why would you want to do that? Because that's going to flatten it and take out all your undo history and all the rest. So it's hard to explain, isn't it? It's hard until you start working with it. It's like, I guess, how would I make an analogy? It's like working in Lego and not, if saying when you export it, you've got to dip this thing that you've made in Lego in glue and set it in stone. Do you know what I mean? It's the difference between making something in Lego that you can take apart and rearrange, and doing an Airfix kit where when you stick it together, that's it. It's done. You can't pry it apart again. So it makes a kind of, once you grasp it, it makes a sort of fundamental difference in the way that you look at how you work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. I mean, ignoring the Studio Link thing, even now we finding that quite a lot of our customers, our users, are still, as you say, that they might have created something in Affinity Designer, and they want to now bring that into Affinity Publisher and drop it on their document. And we find even now that some people are exporting that as an SVG or as a PDF or whatever it might be, to actually, before they place that in Publisher. And of course, there's absolutely no need or requirement to do that at all. You just save it, and then you can just drop your Affinity Designer file straight onto Publisher without, and as you say, you don't lose any of the, you're not flattening it, you don't lose any of the layers. And of course, in Affinity Publisher, if you actually wanted to expose any of those layers, you can then just double click on it, and it will instantly expose all of the layers and the stuff that you might have added in Affinity Designer. And of course, then you can just flick to the designer persona, and then you've got all the Affinity Designer tools available to you. So, you can then sort of edit and mess about with that file that you've placed without even leaving Publisher.
Yeah, I mean, old habits die hard. That is the truth. And particularly if you work in design for print, it's got a very long and venerable history, but people do get very set in their ways. That's just, but at times, people did change from one thing to another, and they will again. It sometimes takes a while, and of course, some of it is just habit, and some of it, of course, is if you do like I do, working quite often, what you'll get is people will say, "Oh, can you send me that logo? Oh, can I have just the form off the bottom of the page?" But of course, from Affinity, it's only a matter really of exporting that at the last moment if somebody wants it. It's but it's just habit. People do things out of habit because that's how they've always worked, and like you say, you're probably right. I don't think anybody else has actually realistically had the option to do what you've done, which is to build one suite built around one core concept with one. I mean, Adobe. We might as well say, but then again, Photoshop was Photoshop. Adobe Illustrator came from somewhere else and has a completely different code base. InDesign is different. They muttered at one point about using PDF as their core file format, but PDF is a funny thing. PDF is a very funny file format. There you go.
But yeah, I mean, and even if they did consolidate a file format between the apps, which potentially that might be something that they could perhaps do in the future. Of course, without the apps being built on the same core technology, which of course they're not, because they either come from different places or developed totally independently of each other or whatever, they'll never be able to have the Studio Link style, instant flick between the functionality of them from within one app, without, of course, starting from scratch and writing them all again, which is basically what we started doing 10 years ago.
Yeah, very much so. And of course, I guess let's not shy away from it. We're gonna we're gonna say it. One of the biggest bonuses, of course, if you switch over to Affinity, is there's no subscription. You can buy whatever parts you like. You don't have to have all three in the suite. And if you're just a photographer, you don't have to get involved with publisher and designer if you don't want to. You can just lay your money down and take the photo app, which did you won an award for that, didn't you, recently?
For which one?
Photo. Well, you probably won a lot of awards. You probably got a whole mantelpiece full of them, Ash. But
yeah, I can't particularly think of the most recent one, but I mean, yeah, we win awards for the apps quite regularly. Yeah.
Yeah, and
not only is there no subscription, the price is very affordable too. And not only me, but a lot of people thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we were always very intent when we launched that we didn't feel like we had to charge hundreds of dollars for an app. We're a small company. We've got relatively low overheads. The thing that was in some ways most interesting to us is that we kind of wanted to get as many people adopting the app as possible. That's the thing that sort of makes us excited. That's the thing that gets us out of bed in the morning, is actually seeing thousands, well now millions of people using our apps and creating fantastic results from it. So yeah, we didn't want to sort of price it really high and then have really low adoption. Our view was very much the other way around.
Yeah, I've always said anyway that there's a section of the market which is massively underserved, and I guess it's what a lot of people would call the prosumer or semi-pro market, because if you're a professional designer, photographer, whatever, the tools that you use that generate you money. So to some extent, if you have to lay out £50 a month for the tools that you use, that's a business expense. And as long as you use, you generate sufficient profit to cover that, that's not particularly a problem. But what happens is when the tools that people want to use are like that, what happens to the hobbyists, the semi-professionals, the charities, the church groups, whatever? They can't afford that sort of outlay. And then there's another market, there's another sector who's fairly well served, which is I'm not going to call them lesser, because they're not. They're designed to serve a group of people who want to make posters and flyers and booklets and whatnot, but don't necessarily need what we would look at as a full-blown professional package. And there's plenty of apps that serve that market, in the sort of £15 bracket, and there's some very, very good apps down that, in that bracket, if that's what you want. But I've always felt that there was a big gap between those and, if you like, your high-end pro apps. And I think that's where something that Serif always, historically served, although only really on Windows with the Plus apps. But I think you've picked a really good market segment, which is the sort of semi-pro, high-end hobbyist up and into the full-blown pro market, where there's a huge, and obviously has proved correct, because if you've got millions of users, what was it in the keynote? You doubled your users to
2 million. That was back in June. So pretty much and obviously, yeah. So we'd reached 1 million users when we launched Affinity Designer for iPad, and that was in July last year. And then pretty much in the year following that, we've sort of doubled it again to 2 million.
Oh, excellent. That's good. That's really good. I'm pleased
Yeah.
for you.
I mean,
And of course, yeah, we haven't even mentioned the fact that obviously both the designer and the photo app are also available for iPad, for the iPad Pro particularly, but
yeah, I mean, they're actually available for the iPad or standard iPad, I think 5th generation and above, iPad Air 2. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of blurring the lines now a little bit. To be honest with you, we always felt that the apps on iPad were, you do get a better experience if you're using Apple Pencil. And then, of course, when we first launched, the only real opportunity for someone to have Apple Pencil was if, of course, you had iPad Pro. Obviously, that's now changing, or has changed in the last couple of years, as the I think 5th edition was it, or the 5th generation was the first one that supported Apple Pencil, and obviously they've just announced the 7th generation this week, and it's $350 with Apple, and you can use Apple Pencil, and so even that, iPad, our apps still work exceptionally well on, especially if you do have Pencil.
Yeah. So yes, I mean from your point of view, Apple expanding the Pencil support out to the cheapest iPad is a huge bonus, because that that makes a huge potential audience, I would have thought.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that was, fantastic news for us. And I guess especially over the last couple of years, and again with this week's announcement, as the processor performance and GPU power, even of the low-end iPad, improves, as well, then that's all good for us, obviously.
Yeah, and of course, as you told me before, all your stuff is basically written pretty much purely in Metal to take advantage of all the,
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say purely in Metal, but yeah, I mean, specifically for iPad, we did a lot of specific work around iPad to use Metal. So for all of the, main functions, certainly anything obviously that involves pushing pixels around or graphic manipulation, we then, created threads where we kind of basically push that through the iPad's GPU. And that's why we can achieve such good performance on iPad. I mean, I'm trying to think. Yes, I mean, actually, it was just when we launched Publisher this year, we also launched the 1.7 update of Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer. And actually, that was the first time for Affinity Photo anyway, where we started to use Metal on, we started to push. We already were using Metal a little bit on Mac, but the 1.7 launch was, we massively expanded all the functions that we actually use Metal for now, even on Mac, and the performance of that is just totally insane.
Yeah, actually, I remember now. I recall last time you were on, actually, when we talked about Metal, you said, I'm pretty sure I recall now that you said that you were going to expand the use of Metal on Mac, because when you'd started building out the apps, that Metal wasn't the big thing it's become in the intervening years. So yeah,
and,
I mean, yeah, and yes, obviously a lot of people, of course, are also happy and comment quite frequently that you don't sit on your laurels. I mean, the updates seem to come thick and fast. I mean, what we on 1.7.2 now is the latest one, with more speed improvements, more benefits, more shiny.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, to be honest, we've always wanted to push out regular updates, despite the fact, just to mention it again, we're not on subscription. It's still, I think, important for us to make sure we're always, pushing forward and trying to stay ahead of the game. To be honest, I think that because of that, and everyone kind of got very used to the fact that we were regularly updating, we did have probably a longer gap than usual in the run up to the 1.7 launch, because of course our 1.7 launch for Affinity Designer and Affinity Photo, that was a 1.7 launch on Mac, Windows and iPad, and it was also simultaneously launched with Affinity Publisher on Mac and Windows. So there was about what does that make it? Eight effectively different apps on different operating systems that we, had geared up to launch on the same day. And of course, it was important that everything got updated on the same day to 1.7 because that was the code base the publisher was using, and that's the thing that enabled Studio Link to work on day one, and for everything to still share file format on day one. So it was an incredible challenge for us to do that, but it kind of meant that maybe 6 or 7 or 8 months before the launch of 1.7, everyone started to go, hey, why hasn't there been an update recently? But it was, and some of the reasons why we hadn't updated, we actually wanted to keep secret as well. So there was a little bit of impatience, or people wondering, if there was anything wrong, why haven't you done it? But it was all because we were kind of holding everything back to launch on that one day. And now, updates will start flowing, every few months, similar to what we were before. Now we've got that out of the way.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that was a bit of a Herculean task. I'm not surprised. And of course, you, as you say, you launched Publisher simultaneously for Mac and Windows, which, of course, with the previous apps, I don't think you did you? You launched on Mac first, and then Windows shortly after. So that's a big push, really. That's a big push.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's huge.
Right. Now I'm going to ask you a question, which you do not have to answer. You can tell me it's a trade secret, but a lot of guys in our Slack room are particularly interested in what you might or might not be planning next, and a lot of them are quite keen to hear if you might have any plans to do a Lightroom competitor to go with your Photoshop competitor.
Sorry, you want me to answer that? Yeah.
Well, I did.
There's a big gap on the top left-hand corner of Publisher where there are a lot of icons can still fit in there.
So I mean, to be honest with you, it's kind of we've not necessarily kept it a particular secret. I mean, it's absolutely been in our thoughts that would create some form of asset management tool for Affinity, and to be honest, we've kind of dipped in and out a little bit of starting to do some work on it. So the truth is that I'm sure at some point we will have a DAM app. It is still very uncertain over what sort of timeline that might be on, but of course it's something that we know everyone's asking for. All of our customers want it, so we know it's will be an important thing for us to do. I think, as I've already mentioned, the trouble is we're a small team, and we've now got 3 different apps on all these different operating systems, and it's always just a case of trying to focus our efforts in the right place.
Keep all the plates spinning, Ash. You're trying to keep all the plates spinning in at the same time, and the more plates you put up, the harder it gets.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that we've already committed, of course we have to do, is Affinity Publisher on iPad. So that's another plate that will be added into the mix.
Speaking of that, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but I'm assuming it might be something you can answer. I'm going to assume Studio Link can't happen on the iPad just because of restrictions with designing the apps and the way it works on the iPad.
Yeah, I mean, why don't you continue assuming that?
Okay.
Yeah, if ever there was a backhanded leak, it was that.
Yeah,
one.
really. You might have gotten a scoop there.
Well,
but, so what's your timeline on the app coming to the iPad? Do you have like a set date yet?
No, I mean, just generally one of the ways that we've kind of always worked with our development team in particular is to not necessarily put hard dates or deadlines in place, especially with something such as a Publisher on an iPad, where, to be honest, I mean, first of all, we're working on it, right? We're actually actively working and developing it. But there are still, to be honest, problems to be solved, and it's all R&D. You can spend months working on a possible solution for something, and then it turns out it doesn't do the job, and you have to kind of scrap it all and start again.
Apple makes an update and messes everything up.
Well, that's also possible. So, yeah, I think that we know that. I mean, a publisher does have some unique challenges on iPad. Not least of which things like some of the file management. I mean, Apple are making lots of improvements. I mean, iPad OS has got some more improvements, but I mean, just put simply, of course, with desktop publishing documents, people always generally link to images. They don't sort of embed them in their document, and so. Especially if you're working in a business in a network environment and you've got all of your images that are linked to your in-house DAM product, whatever it might be, then if you then take that document away on iPad, you still somehow need to ideally be able to link to those images. So there's problems with such stuff around that. There's problems with fonts because of similar thing. So and these are the types of considerations that we didn't necessarily need to. Or problems that we didn't necessarily need to solve with Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer, but we sure as hell need to solve them for Affinity Publisher. So, so there are some unique things with that makes it quite a challenging app on iPad. But as I say, we're actively working on it. I'd certainly hope that we get it out at some point next year, but it is probably more towards the end of next year than the start of next year. But hopefully we'll be a bit clearer on where we're at in another, say, 6 months.
Well, I think I'm sure everybody would be glad to hear that, but I also think certainly I know that listeners to this show are very much of the opinion that it's nice to know, as long as they know it's coming, and they'd rather it came out when it was ready rather than coming out on a fixed date and only being 3/4 ready. That's very much a thing we get in the sort of feedback here when we have people like yourself on. Quite realistically, often people like yourself say, "Well, I can't say specifically because we have to solve various problems, and it will be done when it's done." But the feedback we always get usually is, as long as company X, Y, or developer X, Y tell us that they're working on it and it's progressing, that's enough, because that we can hold on to that hope, and we'll look forward to it coming out when it's ready. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's important. I mean, as I already mentioned, I mean, like, say the Affinity Publisher on desktop, we ended up being in beta for 9, 10 or 11 months. I can't remember now, but it was
about
a long,
9 months, I think. Yeah.
It was a long time, and that was really. I mean, because I think we started the beta in, say, August time last year. We were originally planning potentially to launch it by the end of the year, but like I say, we didn't have any sort of particular pressure. Obviously the other apps are selling quite well. So from a sort of business or financial standpoint, there wasn't, kind of the board members sort of, putting pressure on to launch the thing. So
get it out. Yeah.
Yes. So and it's great that we can be in that position. We don't have external shareholders putting pressure. All that sort of stuff that a lot of companies have to deal with, or maybe external investors or whatever it might be. We don't have that, and I think that hopefully shines through somewhat in our apps as well. And if we have to push a launch back by 6 months because we want to make it better or fix some extra things or whatever it might be, then we'll just do it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's.
I mean, it shows because, like I said, Studio Link, you didn't want to release that and have someone click the photos button and sit there waiting, going, "What's happening? What's happening?" I mean, it is smooth as whatever you can compare it to. Like I said earlier, you want that to be perfect when you release it, and it definitely shows.
Yeah. Right. I'm going to cross off onto a slightly different tack now, Ash. Two things. Obviously for designer and designer and photo, you have workbooks available with a whole load of tutorials and help and info and all the rest. And I will give it a push. If you're listening to this at the moment, Serif have the workbooks on special. There's 30% off, and I believe you're chucking in a free T-shirt if you order.
There's, I think the T-shirt is actually like an email exclusive to.
Yeah, well, I'll put the link. I will put the link in the show notes for the listeners. Yes,
Good.
there is. There's a follow this link to get a free T-shirt when you order your. So the link for that will be in the show notes. If you want to get a free T-shirt as well as 30% off the workbooks, and of course, you know what I'm going to ask you next. When will there be a workbook for publisher?
Well, that will definitely be out next year. I mean, we're working on it now. Yeah, I would expect it to be out in the first half of next year. I can't necessarily give you a more accurate thing, but it's being actively worked on. I mean, to be honest, some of the things that we are, we actually also want another couple of features to make its way onto the app before we launch the workbook. So the first thing is that IDML import is very close to being available.
That's big. That's really big. I mean, I mean, I'm sure you've probably heard me say this before, Ash, but at home, I switched over to the Affinity Suite because on my slightly older hardware at home, Adobe doesn't perform particularly well. Adobe have introduced some incredibly annoying bugs in the last few updates, which drive me spare. And at home, out of my own pocket, I'm not particularly prepared to keep giving them that sort of money. So at work, of course, there's a slightly different dynamic in that I don't have the final say on these things, and there are several of us at several desks all working. And, of course, you've got the historical legacy. The first thing that, any kind of purported change in the way we work, the first thing that management say is, and how are we going to cope with all our, historical files? So IDML import would be a huge, huge step.
Indeed.
And I think a lot of people, there would be a lot of people out there rubbing their hands with glee should that, come up as a headline feature in let's say in the next year or so.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it will be sooner than that, but at the same time, it will be rather remiss if we launch a workbook that doesn't talk about the IDML import feature, for example.
Exactly, yeah.
So we kind of, because we know there's still, there's a few quite big features coming up for publisher. I won't mention any more now, but we want to wait until they're in before we
of course
launch the workbook.
I mean, whenever people have asked me about the Affinity Suite and how does it compare to the Adobe Suite, I always say it's 95% there, but you've got to bear in mind that the Affinity products are 5 years old at the most, as you said. Photoshop is 30 years old, for God's sake, and I think, or is it Illustrator? I can't remember, but I mean, I've been using let's face it, I was using Adobe Illustrator because 88 Illustrator 88 was a big thing. So there you go. That shows you how long Illustrator's been going, and Photoshop was a few years younger than that. So they've got a long head start.
They have. I mean, of course, actually, the other great thing about the Affinity Publisher workbook and working on that is, of course, we're writing it all in Affinity Publisher. So that's kind of quite cool that all of the workbooks would have actually been composed and laid out and everything within the app that we're talking about. Yep.
Well, the dog fooding at its best. And also, of course, if you're doing that, if you find any bugs, you can squash them before you publish the book.
That is true,
yeah. Oh dear. No, so that's good. That's all good. That's all really good news. So I think we've pretty much covered a lot of it. Donny, was there anything else in particular you had in mind to talk to Ash about? I
don't think so. Nothing I can think of offhand. Is there anything you can talk about that you haven't talked about that's upcoming, or with Illustrator or Photo?
No, I don't think there's anything that I'm
Nothing else he's willing to divulge. I think.
Actually, one sort of relatively minor thing is, of course, we will be launching an update in the next few weeks. Ready for the 30th of September when iPadOS comes out, and in preparation for Catalina, which I guess will be October sometime. So there is a relatively minor update coming out for that. Of course, perhaps one of the nice new features of all of that system now with Apple is the sidecar feature so you can use your iPad as a second display, but you can also use it as a pseudo graphics tablet. So obviously that's quite a cool thing for us. So our apps will definitely be having updates to be able to fully support all of that, ready for their launch. But yeah, that's the main thing that's kind of upcoming shortly.
Does the I forget what it's called, but the feature where it's supposed to be the one-click button to make the apps work across platforms, I'm guessing that doesn't help because the apps are so different, even though they're similar between iPad and Mac. They're still so different in some ways with how they work, the workflow and everything.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things with, what do you mean in reference to the sidecar feature?
No, not sidecar. I forget what it's called. When you have like an iPad app and you're supposed to be able to click a button and then it converts it to the Mac app. And
we're not so, at the moment at least, we're not really kind of considering utilizing any of that functionality. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of apps that will do that are apps that at the moment are just on iPad and they want the ability to run on Mac. But I think that from what I know or what I've seen, and I'm not fully versed on this, that's mostly relatively simple apps, like it might be a flight booking application or something like that. Right. Rather than a full-on creative thing where you might be editing a 100 megapixel image and you want real-time editing. And of course, for us, we've already got Mac and an iPad version. So we also very much want. I think it's very important that they're very different. iPad is, it's got all of the features and functionality, but for it to work as an iPad app, you do need to totally rethink the UI, gestures, all of these things. Whereas on Mac, when you're using a mouse or whatever, it's a very different way of working, and you kind of want high density and be able to see many more things when you're working. So I think our approach of keeping focused on the Mac OS version separately to an iPad OS version is still very important.
No, I think possibly what Donny was thinking about is that there's the handoff, so that. But of course, as far as I can see, that you don't really need to make much use of that anyway, because if you're using one file format and you can go from, you simply close one device,
save it in iCloud, and
just close one. Close your iPad version and open the file on the Mac or Windows.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that kind of, handoff is very cool, but I do find that mostly works well in things like, your email. You can, if I open an email on my iPhone, the little thing will pop up in the dock and say, would you like to open it there? And it's just like, great, because if I want to, if it's a long email, trying to scroll through it all on my iPhone can be a bit tedious, but I'm not sure that it's necessarily something that would have a great deal of utility in, other than perhaps simply just handing a file across from one to another.
Although from our testing and our perspective, handoff has actually never been a particularly fast. So it's fine for handoff. Like if you're browsing a website on your Mac and you want to pick up the same page on your iPad, it's only got to send your iPad a very small amount of data.
Exactly.
Just a web address. And if it's an email, it's just got to send a bit of text. It might be 100K at most. Yeah. Whereas our documents are very big, and actually the handoff tech, at least at the moment, doesn't really allow for sort of instant transfer. You still got to wait for it to come across. So you might as well just
close one.
Put it on iCloud Drive and sync it. It's the same sort of speed anyway.
Yeah, it's the same, exactly the same. I don't, I wouldn't. Yeah, I'm certainly not going to ding you for that one, Ash. It's no, that's that makes perfect sense. So, thank you for coming on. Basically,
it's been a pleasure. Yeah, I can't believe it's been a year or so since we last spoke. But,
I know it's been amazing. what we normally do here is the sort of wrap up. I know Donny's going to get off, so I think we're probably just going to close the show out with John Nemo. So if you'd like to just tout where people can, go read more in case they don't know enough already, feel free and, mention your social medias and the such, and that will be lovely.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, obviously, you just go on Google and search for Affinity apps, which will take you to the right place, but it's affinity.serif.com. Our social handles are at Affinity by Serif, obviously on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the usual places.
Lovely. Fantastic. Donny, are you going to do your huge marketing empire?
I'll just
or do you just want to mention the newest ones and all
I'll
the rest?
I'll just mention
will be
the newest ones from over the summer break, but I will say most of it had Affinity involved in some shape or form. But my cousin and I have a website called twofundads.com, and we actually just created a card game called What's Your Favorite? And it's an actual card game. You can buy an actual deck of cards. It's not like poker or anything like that. It's a kind of a kid's fun question game that can be used anywhere. And I found a site that does on-demand printing, and it's actually pretty cool. We were real excited about it. So you can go to twofundads.com. That's the number 2, fundads.com for more information on that. And we also have a web cartoon and a YouTube video called Kidums, which you can find links to that on there. And all the usual links will be in the show notes.
Fantastic. You can find all of our stuff, of course, over at essentialapple.com. You can follow me on the Twitter as @Serenak, and that's SERENAK. And I think that's probably about it. Thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon or via the Pinecast tips jar. Thank you to everybody who uses the Amazon affiliate link on the website. It's a big red button. You can't really miss it. Thank you very much to Ashley for coming on and talking to us. And I think we'll go out with John Nemo, and we'll see you all next week. So, goodbye. This is where you say goodbye, chaps.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Nemo's hardware store just received 2 excellent power charging systems from a company called Limitless Innovations. It's all one word on their website, LIMITLESSINNOVATIONS, limitlessinnovations.com. The first one is an exceptional value. It's called Charge Hub, CHARGEHUB, Charge Hub Home Base Power Bank Docking Station, $60 in the U.S. It's an oblong dock with a slot for setting your phone in, and included are 4 4,000 mAh power banks, USB portable power charging units. They're small, they're compact, they hold enough to more than charge up even the biggest iPhone. They have an extra bonus of a little flashlight or torch built in, and this is a fabulous product for $60. 4 of these, 4 different colors. There's a gold, they're sort of like the Apple colors, a rose gold. The colors are a gold, a rosy, and then a graphite and a black. This is terrific. When I teach, I can just hand one of these to 4 students in my workshop, and I say, low on power? No problem. Charge your phone, your pad, whatever, your camera, headphones, speakers, whatever. Just charge them up. This is terrific. Anybody who has a family, works in a classroom or lab or office setting, for $60 US, this is exceptional value. Strongest recommendation from Nemo's hardware store to the Charge Hub Home Base Power Bank Docking Station. Please look this up at limitlessinnovations.com and also from the link on our website here at Essential Apple. You will want to get one of these as a gift for everybody you know and receive it as a gift from everybody you know. It's that good. Well done, Limitless Innovations, with lots of innovation at a very, very reasonable price. From the same company, we also have the Charge Hub Go Plus, CHARGEHUBGO, and plus, the plus sign. the Charge Hub Go Plus power bank with wireless charging pad, USB charging port, and 2 built-in cables for $40. This is a screaming deal. You charge this up using your typical USB micro charger, and they give you a cable. You can plug it into any power brick that you have that has USB in it. And then very, very conveniently, tucked in to the sides of it, it's slimline. It's long and narrow, but very slim, is both a lightning tip and a micro USB tip. Really, really handy. And then, right on the top, right in the middle of the flat part, is the little circular area for charging up your Qi, Qi, whatever you charge up using wireless charging, including a phone. And let's see if an Apple Watch will work. We'll find out. Let me read you the description. It features a wireless charging pad, a USB charging port, 2 built-in charging cables that are compatible with micro, lightning, and USB-C devices. The powerful 5,000 mAh battery capacity will keep devices charged without needing any additional accessories. I agree. I am taking this with me when I travel, everywhere I go. This is a fabulous product. And again, I give it the strongest recommendation. Only $40 for something this versatile, well-designed, stylish, and incredibly easy to use. To tell you the truth, I don't know about the Apple Watch. I'll have to find out about that. But if it's going to work, it's going to work. But definitely something that uses the Qi or Qi charging will definitely work on that round circle on the top. Final product has nothing to do with charging. That's the zipper. I'm unzipping it. There's 2 compartments on the side. It's a large rectangular duffel, sort of like a huge tote bag, like you could put a small musical instrument in. I'm unzipping the other side, and it's called a sneaker duffel. You can put 2 pairs of shoes, one on either end of this. There's a pocket on the outside for a water bottle, another zippered outside pocket for putting chargers and other accessories. Then you unzip the top using 2 zippers. You look in, and it's about 7 inches across by a foot and over a foot deep. There's a nice shoulder strap with a pad on it. And my favorite feature, a Velcro compartment that I can slide my iPad in, or a small, very small computer. But what this is, it's a bag for athletes and anybody who wants to isolate your shoes from the rest of your stuff. I don't need to explain why. Sometimes that really comes in handy. Let me give you the name, the description, and the price. It's called the Galaxy Black Reflective Sneaker Duffel by Hex, H-E-X. Website is Hexbrand, Hexbrand, hexbrand.com. Cost is $160 in the U.S. You will have this for decades. It is very well built, very rugged, stands up extremely flat, even has little feet on the bottom to keep it off the floor. Now it's interesting. They show in their picture the iPad being on the outside, in the outside zippered compartment. I actually thought it might want to be on the inside, but you can decide on that. There are some good pictures, very good pictures on the website, much better than I could take. So please have a look at the beautifully lined, really well designed. It's sort of a rugged and squishy material all at the same time. A double grab strap at the top to hold it, and then the aforementioned shoulder strap. It's really neat. On the website, it shows it expanded with the sneakers in there. And you don't need to use it just for luggage. We're going to use it in my music group to put in microphones and other cables so we can keep track of what's what. So $160 is a lot of money. There's a lot of value here in the Hex Galaxy Black Reflective Sneaker Duffel from a good company. We've been working with them for a long time here at Nemo's hardware store. There's even some vent holes, some little tiny vent holes to vent the aforementioned speakers. Oh, and there's a little mesh pocket inside of each of the sneaker compartments for putting in other stuff, athletic stuff, goggles, swimsuits, whatever you take when you travel, whether you're athletic, technical, or just a mere mortal carrying around your stuff in a stylish and reflective sneaker duffel. Well done, Hex, and very well done, Limitless Innovations. Back next week.
You've been listening to the Essential Apple podcast, and I'd like to say if you enjoy the show and would like to support us, feel free to go over to the website essentialapple.com and you will find links to both Patreon